Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion, Chaye Sarah, was actually my bar mitzvah portion. So at the time, my family had already moved from Israel, and we were living in France. And we decided to go back to Jerusalem for my bar mitzvah. And we had some of our family who flew over all the way from Canada. And we had all of my friends who I knew from my childhood in Israel and family friends. It was just this wonderful return to my source, which is what a bar and bat mitzvah should be. So we rented out a space overlooking the old city, just outside the walls, Jaffa Gate. And then we had family members who led the service, and I chanted and spoke, and it was all very lovely. It was also one of those strange weeks where everything happens at the same time, because just a few days before my bar mitzvah happened, we got the news that my uncle Shlomo, who is a well-known rabbi, had suddenly passed of a heart attack. And he was this very big presence in my life, earlier especially. So I grew up in the walls of a yeshiva in the old city that my father was running, and Shlomo taught there and did music there. And his nigunim always filled the space. His followers are always there, and my father was very close to him for a long time and received his second rabbinic ordination from him, with the first person that Shlomo ever made a rabbi. We had all these family gatherings at first around him. And even when I moved to France, his music was still a very big part of our family's life and my Jewish life. And so when we heard this news that he passed suddenly just a few days before my bar mitzvah, we were in a rented apartment in Jerusalem, and I remember somehow my reaction to it was I went down and sat down at the piano and played one of his melodies on the piano. And I remember going to the funeral, and there were thousands of people there, and the chief rabbi of Israel was there, and one of the officiants. And my father, who had been one of his main students, walked up, and I have this memory of him walking up. It was in Har Menuchot, which is a cemetery right outside of Jerusalem, and my father walking up the hill, and all of his old friends and companions parting to let him go grieve at his uncle's gravesite. And, on one hand, it completely overshadowed my bar mitzvah, but somehow the whole effect, the bar mitzvah, being in Jerusalem, and Shlomo dying, and seeing all these old community members, the melodies, chanting Torah, this made me feel so connected to who I was, to where I came from, to my source, to my Jewish neshama, to God. All of it was a very powerful experience. So this parsha of ours, Chaye Sarah, interesting, but it's really about the establishment of the place that is the heart of Jewish peoplehood, the spiritual heart. So Sarah dies, as mentioned earlier, and Abraham looks for a place to bury her, and he negotiates with the local Hittites, and he buys the cave of the Machpelah in Hebron, which is perhaps our oldest holy site that we still go to. And the Torah goes into all this depth. We read this morning how they negotiate for it, and they go back and forth, a little Middle Eastern haggling going on. Abraham's graciousness comes through all of it. And it's the first time the Torah spends all this verses to tell us about one specific piece of land. And at the end, it's sold to Abraham at an exorbitant but appropriate price. And it's where Sarah is buried, later Abraham is buried, and Isaac and Ishmael go there to bury him, coming back together. And then Jacob and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Leah, and all our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried in this one physical place. And so Jerusalem is Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem's our capital, where the temple will eventually be, but the Machpelah in Hebron is the heart of the Jewish people, considered to be the second holiest place after the Kotel. And there's so many places about its symbolic place also, connecting to the very source of the Jewish people, considered to be the gateway to the Garden of Eden. And they also say not only our patriarchs and matriarchs are buried there, but Adam and Eve are also buried there, just to give us a feeling of connection, how primordial this place is. that when all of our souls go out of this world, the Zohar says, they go through the Machpelah, symbol for the Jewish soul. So 2 decades ago, I had the opportunity to myself go visit Hebron. I hadn't been there since I was a very young child. And really, all I knew about the Machpelah, not sure how many people here have been there, but in the last few decades, and 3 decades, it's really been associated with the conflict. It's really the heart of the conflict, right? All the different attacks there, and the place in the Second Intifada where a lot of the fighting went on. Baruch Goldstein massacre. It was one of the places of the worst tension between settlers and Palestinians who lived there. And I just remember driving through those hills on the way there and suddenly feeling, as we're driving through all these places I'd seen in newsreels and from the conflict, on the other hand, looking around and seeing this looks like the land of the Bible. There's little stone walls and there's shepherds, and it's one of those places that just looks like the land of the Bible, amidst all of the signs of the conflict. The sun rays going down in that ethereal light that we still call biblical. Remember parking our car and having to get into a bulletproof bus to actually go into the city itself. A very, very strange experience, really a war-torn city, but suddenly they're having essentially an ultra-Orthodox festival there on Sukkot. And all of us going up to this ancient building surrounding the Machpelah. And this building is made by Herod also, except it's actually still intact, pretty much, unlike the Kotel and the temple, obviously. And then some people say it's arguably the oldest building in the world, still intact and still used for its original purpose in the whole world. So you walk in among crowds in these beautiful spaces where Abraham and Sarah are supposedly buried, and in the patriarchs and matriarchs, except for Rachel. I just remember having this strange feeling as the people there learning and praying and trying to find, what do we do in this ancient place? Just having this feeling myself that this is the source of the Jewish people, the soul, the source of the ancient well of Judaism. I'd never been in a place that felt so anciently Jewish. Suddenly I'd understood what Judaism was, just in the air. The bones of our ancestors were there. It almost felt like Judaism was pouring out of some crack in the ground. Really, really a very powerful moment of connecting to my source. So we have all these experiences in our lives, each one of us, that connect us to where we come from, to our source. Really, all of our Jewish rituals, everything we do in this room, those are also gateways to our source, to where we come from. Our rituals, our melodies, our worship, the spaces we're in. And even 1,000 miles away from the physical source of Judaism, here in this very synagogue, when we read Torah, we pray these words in our Sidurim. Maybe now they're a little bit more colorfully printed than they've been for millennia, but they're the same words. And living these paths and walking these ways, we're connecting to our source. We're connecting to where we come from. And it's like touching a yard site plaque, except we're going spiritually, not just our parents or those who go before us, endless links all the way back to our source. Because the Machpelah isn't just a physical place, but it's a spiritual place. So tonight is our 75th anniversary. Really, we're connecting to our history. We're connecting to the traditions of the synagogue, who we are. We're connecting to our address into that source, to that link. We really have a very unique address. And this quote I've been thinking a lot about, not by my might nor by my power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And I don't know of any other synagogue probably in the world who has this quote on its walls. Probably not a single other synagogue. And what an incredible message it is. It's our own unique source. Because all of these traditions and all these places and all these moments in our lives, they take us back to who we are and where we come from. Because there's so much in our lives that does the opposite, that takes us away from that source. connects us to our ancestors, and it becomes our address in the heavens to that place that brings us comfort and that roots us into our being. And it reminds us of our place, that we're not just in our little mundane lives, we're part of much greater stories and perspectives and expanses. And really, they bring us home. They take us home. May we all feel a little bit of that call tonight. Shabbat Shalom.